Hi everyone, I'm Amandanda, and I'm bringing you an EL Live bonus interview with Henry Seton. He wrote the article, Interrupting Doom Loops, Reflections on Mid-Year Teacher Exits for the December-January issue of Educational Leadership. Here he is, talking to EL Editor-in-Chief, Anthony Rebora.
Hello everyone, I'm Anthony Rebora. I'm the Editor-in-Chief of Educational Leadership. I'm joined tonight by Henry Seton, who is a humanities teacher, leader, and writer. He's the former chair of the Humanities Department at the Community Charter School of Cambridge in Massachusetts. He's becoming a regular writer for EL. He has a really interesting and timely article in our December issue entitled Interrupting Doom Loops, Reflections on Mid-Year Teacher Exits. I wanted to talk with him about that. So welcome, Henry.
Hey, thank you so much for having me here.
So I want to talk about that term, doom loops. It's usually used in organizational theory, but in this article, you're applying it to individual teachers in their careers. Can you talk a little bit about what you mean by doom loops in this context?
Yeah, absolutely. So I recently got to take a master's course with Joel Maida, who does a lot of work around deeper learning, and had a lot of us students thinking about reinforcing loops, both upward and downward loops, also called in psychology virtuous cycles and vicious cycles. And for several years, especially right before I moved here to Ohio, I was the department chair. I was often working on developing young teachers. And so I was obsessed with, like so many teacher coaches and instructional coaches out there, obsessed with how do we accelerate teacher growth as much as possible. And there's been a lot of wonderful literature on that. I particularly am a big fan of Paul Bambrick's and Toyo's Get Better Faster, which has a lot of great resources on that. But unfortunately, with my recent move to Ohio over the past year, adjusting to a new school, I quickly found myself in the opposite, just feeling like as I was trying to adjust to this new school in a new setting, and I'm happy to talk more about it, that my skills and capabilities and my emotional constancy were almost going in reverse. And those of us who have worked with struggling new teachers have often seen this cycle of regression. We often think about it with rookie teachers, but me as a veteran teacher right in the middle of it, it just got me thinking more and more about these doom loops and how can we interrupt them.
Right, so it happens a lot in schools and even to veteran teachers, as you're saying. Yeah. So it's a cycle, it's kind of a downward cycle, normally what might be referred to as burnout, right? Or
yeah, absolutely. And I think often, I'm even guilty myself historically of viewing these as having an inevitable destiny, which is the teachers leaving the school, if not the profession. I think often we watch it happen from the sidelines and wonder to what degree it's worth getting involved. And I think now I was lucky enough that my school administrators and peers really stepped up for me and went to bat for me in trying to make the school work. And I was, thankfully able to make it through the year. And I think I'm much more aware and cognizant about how to interrupt these doom loops and these moments of burnout, whether they're rapid cycles or longer periods.
Right. So that's part of the article is really engaging because it is a personal story, but you do have a larger message about how to interrupt these doom loops in schools, which are a major problem, and how we don't have to just let them be. What were some of the steps that helped you and that you think could be applied in other cases?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the number one thing was, so I was working at a young school in a high poverty setting with about half as much resources per pupil as my previous school in the Boston area.
Oh.
And it was clear that the administrators knew that the school was a taxing environment, and they had from the get-go built in the capacity scheduling wise into their own schedules, into student schedules, into other teacher leader schedules to intervene when teachers were struggling. So 3 things that particularly helped that I talked about. One was that they were able to cover me for a couple of days just to kind of reconfigure curriculum to meet students where they were in terms of rigor. The second thing that was probably the most helpful was that they were able to assign kind of a veteran teacher leader at that school who knew the school culture. She was basically assigned to my classroom as a co-teacher for 1 quarter. And she really helped me align my classroom management and my classroom culture with the school a little bit better, what to sweat, what to let slide. And thirdly, they were actually able to combine 2 of my smaller sections into one. And I had to take on an extra study hall in return, but basically just bought me a little bit more breathing time in the day. This was a school where basically a young charter school that I think will become more sustainable over time, but it was just graduating its first group of seniors. And it was basically impossible to spend less than 9 or 10 hours in the building each day, plus other hours in the day. And I very quickly found myself in a doom loop because of the length of the day and kind of having friction with students. And these 3 interventions really helped me kind of stop that doom loop.
And most importantly, as you point out in the article, they got you through the year, as opposed to having a mid-year break, which would have affected the students and the rest of the staff.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I wanted to ask you, I know you're very interested in issues around teacher retention and sustainability of teaching careers. Right now, this year, we're hearing a lot about the difficulties that educators, teachers, and leaders are facing with the changing formats and all the issues that have come up with the pandemic. So I imagine, or I don't imagine, I know, I'm hearing that we're maybe seeing a lot of these doom loops happening now, accelerating and becoming more widespread. Well, how, I know you wouldn't have the answers. It's a big problem. I know you might have the answers necessarily, but how could this be addressed at scale? I mean, if we have a lot of demoralization and struggle in the teaching profession right now, how can this be addressed by school leaders or by lawmakers or policymakers?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm trying to think, especially in the short term, right? I think so many educators and school leaders are just focused on getting through this school year and hoping that things will be better in what will be 2021-22 school year. I think it's a phenomenal question. I think this is more of an abstract answer, but I think one of the most important things we can do at the school level is normalizing rather than stigmatizing teacher doom loops. As I talk about in the piece, it's basically inevitable given the difficulties of our profession that the teachers are going to encounter these, whether early in their career or later in the career. What I'm sure both of us are hearing from a lot with teachers now is that it's often these shifts in the schedule, whether it's the hybrid learning or the return to in-person instruction, that is really taking a great toll on teachers. So I think we just need to normalize it, give teachers a voice to advocate for what they need, give teachers options as much as possible. It's really tricky, and just giving teachers opportunities to support one another. I'd be curious to hear your thoughts, but I think one interesting thing that we've been hearing about is teachers taking advantage of leave policies or teachers opting into early retirement. And obviously that happening mid-year is not ideal for students and adults, as I talk about in the article, for so many reasons. Right. But I wonder if in a short-term leave is better in the long term if a teacher can then bounce back later in the semester. I think it's a really context-driven question. I don't know. What do you think?
Well, you're the expert on this subject. It's a really difficult subject. It's something we are struggling with in terms of how we provide content to support teachers and what they're going through. And actually, this issue on educator mental health is part of that. We're trying to support teachers in that way because we know this has been a difficult year. And I like what you said about normalizing doom loops, normalizing the struggle, so it's not something that is just seen as inevitable and kind of ignored, but that we see it as something that is actually happening and that it can be addressed, or at least we should try to address. I think that's the bigger picture, but I don't have the answers either. This is just a difficult year in a lot of industries, of course. But especially education. A lot of problems there. Anyway, I appreciate your joining us.
Yes.
And I hope people will get a chance to read your article. Again, it's called Interrupting Doom Loops, Reflections on Mid-Year Teacher Exits. It's in our December issue on educator mental health. And I
got it right here.
Got it too.
It is a phenomenal issue.
Great, thank you.
Strong content in there. A lot of stuff that I hadn't encountered myself about teacher mental health. Really strongly recommend it.
I will say, I do think it's very timely. People get a lot of it, and we've had a lot of great contributors like you with a lot of experience and expertise.
My pleasure, my honor.